This is a video response that I'm posting to address a bunch of questions that I've gotten from members lately on YouTube. Not too long ago, I posted a video showing me using this synthesizer and jamming with a Korg DS10. I knew the moment I posted that video that I was going to get my ass kicked with a bunch of questions asking me about this keyboard. And the questions that have been coming in, and people have been saying, Squeak, what the hell is the Roland RS-70, and why does it look just like the Juno D, or a lot like the Juno D? And so I'm going to just go right into it and address that first question. The biggest misconception is when people see the RS-70, the first thing they say is it looks just like a Juno D. But the reality of that is, it's the reverse. It's not the Roland RS-70 that looks like the Juno D. It's the Juno D that looks like the RS-70. And to be more accurate, it's the Juno D that looks like the RS-50. There are two keyboards in this series, the RS-70 and the RS-50. The RS-50 is the little brother to this keyboard. So what are the differences? The differences are actually pretty major. All of you out there who have the classic Juno D, not the limited edition, but the classic Juno D, this will apply to you. Right off the top, there is a wish list that came out for the Juno D. Usually when keyboards come out, people generate a user wish list, things that they wish it had that they didn't include. To those of you out there who own the classic Juno D, that wish list is this keyboard. But what's odd about it is the wish list for the Juno D actually came out a year before the Juno D was released. This keyboard came out, and I believe it was 2003, and I believe the Juno D came out in 2004. So what are some of the major differences? Well, one that people wanted on the Juno D that you don't have is some of the MIDI options. On the back of the Juno D, you have the MIDI in and out. No USB jack. On the RS-70, you have a USB jack as well as MIDI in and out. And so with the Juno D, you're most likely going to have to buy a USB MIDI interface unless you have a really old computer that takes the MIDI to joystick port. So that's one notable difference. Another noticeable difference here is you may not be able to see it in the video, but a lot of people have said about the Juno D that they wish that it had external storage mediums such as SD card or be able to use a thumb drive. With the Juno D, you have to save all of your data internally, or you have to hook it up to a computer and dump all your data down to a computer to back it up. The RS-70, you can't see it in the video very well, but it's right here. The RS-70 has a floppy disk drive. Now I know that's dated by today's standards, but back in 2003, they were still using floppy disk drives. And the floppy disk drive lets you store and save data, and you can load data as well, but the floppy does something else. The floppy also doubles as a standard MIDI file player. You can load standard MIDI files on the floppy disk, and you can stream them directly from the floppy without having to load them into memory. There's a dedicated button right here under the tap tempo. You hit shift and it says SMF player. So you can select any standard MIDI file and stream it directly from the disk. That's a pretty cool feature. Everything else, if you notice here, the layout is the same. You know, you have your exact same categories here with the patches. D-beam is set up the same. Your mode is set up the same with the exception of a few buttons because some features this has that the Juno doesn't have. Your patch modifier is the same. Your tone destination, key mode, that's all the same. The body's the same, but you'll notice this section right here. The Juno D is completely blank. This section right here is also an area where the wish list for the Juno D, people have said, you know, we wish it had some type of a sequencer. Well, the RS-70 has a sequencer. The RS-70 has a 16-track pattern sequencer with real-time loop recording, many post-editing options such as being able to copy patterns, microscope editing, and you can do all the editing such as volume and panning and so forth. But another cool feature is on the Juno D, your knobs can transmit MIDI data. On the RS-70, they do the same thing. However, the sequencer will record your knob movements. So if you want to record a filter sweep in like a dance track or something like that, you can record your filter sweep into the sequencer, which is really cool. The internal sequencer has a note storage of 100,000 notes. It's pretty big. Well, not big when you compare it to the Tritons, but in 2003 for a budget synthesizer, having 100,000 note capacity is pretty good. So you can store 100,000 notes. And another area that kind of jumps off of the sequencer that puts this model above the Juno D is the user performances. I believe the Juno D only has 8 user performances. With the RS-70, You obviously, with performances they're tied to sequences. So when you have a sequence or a pattern, you have your 16-part performance tied to it. With the sequencer on the RS-70, you can store 256 user patterns. And what that also means is that you can also store 256 user performances to memory, because you don't have to use the pattern memory to record patterns. You can just use it for performances. So that's another really cool feature. Let's see what else. The keypad's different. The RS-70 does have a different keypad, and to be honest, I think I like the keypad of the Juno D better than the RS-70, because I don't know what Roland did or where they got the keypad for this one. It's not real bad, but it could have been a hell of a lot better. The polyphony on these two models is the same. It's 64 voices, just like the Juno D. However, the ROM on the RS-70 compared to the classic Juno D, and the reason I say classic Juno D is there's two Juno Ds. There's a Juno D Classic and there's a Juno D Limited Edition. The classic Juno D only has 32 megabytes to the ROM. The RS-70 has twice that. You've got 64 megabytes to the ROM. And another area that the RS-70 pushes over top of the Juno D is, I think the Juno D, you can only store 2 user drum kits. The RS-70 will allow you to store 16 user drum kits. The backlighting is different. The Juno D has the orange backlighting, but the RS-70 has a blue backlight. Personally, I like the blue backlight better. So those are some of the major differences. If you can find one of these things, I'm telling you, they're really hard to find. Every so often they pop up on eBay, but if you do find one of these things, do not pay more than $600 for that keyboard. And when I say $600, I'm talking about an RS-70 that is in absolute mint condition with the original box, the manual, and the software. There's a guy right now on eBay who's selling an RS-70, and this guy is selling it for $699 with the buy it now option, and I'm going to tell you that's a ripoff. This keyboard in used condition goes from $500 to $550. In absolute mint condition with the box, paperwork, and everything, it sells for $600. So don't pay over that for this keyboard. Again, they're hard to find. You know, I don't know why Roland did this. The keyboard came out in 2003. It debuted at NAMM. Jim Stout did a review on this as well, or did a video for it. And as fast as it showed up on the scene, it left just as quickly. Like a fart in the wind, it just vanished. And then suddenly the Juno D was on the scene. If you can find it, snatch it up. Those of you who have a Juno D and you wish that it could sequence and do a lot of other stuff, buy this keyboard if you can find it. It's worth every penny. It's one of those real underrated synths that Roland released that didn't really see the light of day like it should have. So if anybody else has any more questions about this synthesizer, feel free to email me. I can answer those questions to the best that I can. Another thing to note real quick too is the user interface. It is identical. The user interface on the RS-70 is exactly like the Juno D. With the differences of a few features that the RS has that the Juno doesn't have, like the sequencer. Okay, you're not going to have the sequencer section, so that's not going to be in there. You won't have the track mute button, and under your mode, you're not going to have like the pattern mode and so forth. There is a song mode, which means you can go into a song mode and chain all your user patterns together to create a song. So that's another pretty cool feature. I didn't talk about that one. So if you have any questions, just ask me. For those who do have the Juno D, I want you to do something. This is going to make you scratch your head and say, what the hell? If you want to see a really good example of how a keyboard company cut every possible corner to recycle a keyboard, go to RolandUS.com and look up the Roland RS-70. The Roland RS-70, it's essentially the Juno D. It's got the same specs. It's got the exact same body. With the difference, I'm not sure about the patches. I think the patches are going to vary. But go to RolandUS.com and look at the RS-70. You're going to be staring at a silver Juno D with a different sound set. Again, any questions, feel free to email me, okay?